Everyone, welcome to Humble Stature. And today I wanted to go through my article, which is The Dichotomy of the Warrior Path. And so here we go. So, out of high school, I wanted to be a professional mixed martial arts fighter. From 16 to 24, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, BJJ, and MMA were my life. After massively struggling with depression due to a major spiritual awakening when I was 14 on a Native American vision quest, becoming a warrior gave me an identity and taught me how to fight back against my own demons. It instilled an identity that would allow me to face the world on my own terms. There's just a couple of thoughts about this. So I actually did three Native American vision quests, one when I was 13, 14, and 15. And funny enough, the first one was a bit of a disaster. I ended up being on a right anthill, and it just didn't go well. I actually had to come back early from that one. And then when I was about 14 the next year, we did another one, and I ended up having this out of body experience where you basically, I could see everything for miles, and um, it was just this really transformational experience. And then going from that back to middle school was really traumatic. And so that's what it ended up really starting my depression, or at least, you know, how to say, like it really just forced me to have to answer a lot of questions about the world and who I was in a way that just made it the core thing that I was interested in pretty much from that point on. But then with the depression, it kind of wavered where, sometimes obviously I was more just depressed, and then other times I could actually do something about it and do some sort of spiritual practice. But it all kind of, you know, was, it was tough. So, next paragraph. Despite how positive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was when I was young, as I got older, I noticed that something started it being really off. I've always been a deep spiritual person and thought to myself as a spiritual warrior ever since I found martial arts. But I hit a wall. When I would train, I stopped feeling a sense of progress, but instead a ruthless world where I was going to be the alpha male no matter what. If I didn't tap in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, if a guy didn't tap in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, I was going to break his arm. No second thought about it. If anyone on the street wanted to fight, which never happened, I was ready to lay down the law. In my personal life, almost everything was violent. I listened to a combination of hardcore industrial rap. I worked as a bouncer at a club where I was always looking for someone starting trouble. I got into dating multiple women and playing out my domination fantasies. And all this together put me in a world that was never happy, loving, or peaceful. It was all about the grind and not being a bitch. And this is kind of like the point where I feel like a lot of guys, I think a lot of people think if you become a champion, like Mike Tyson's probably the best example of this. If you just become a vicious champion, you'll reach some sort of pinnacle of human potential. And I think it's pretty far from the truth. If you look at Mike Tyson, a lot of the times he was just very depressed and sad, and it took him a long time in order to really kind of find any sort of peace. And it's kind of weird how in society we can, this is a lot with like fame and different stuff, how we can hold something on this pedestal that actually has really very little, if none, or no intrinsic value. And that's kind of where I felt like I was at, where it's like I was just fighting for the sake of fighting. Um, and it's like everything in my life, like everything that I thought was cool was because it was somehow violent or rough or difficult, and that's what made it cool. And at some point, you kind of realize, okay, well, if I actually want to be happy, then I better kind of find a new way to think about this stuff, find a new way of being in the world. And that's why, as you'll see, I ended up leaving jiu-jitsu for a period of time. And now I'm training, and we'll get into that. But yeah, especially at this time, it was positive when it was just fighting the depression, but then it became part of this force of darkness that is like a cloud following me. In a moment of insight from just contemplating why everything felt so wrong, I decided to start over. That's when I left and lived at an Essen-Goenk Vipassana center for 1 year. At these centers, you meditate for 12 hours a day, 3 hours being mandatory group sits, the rest being optional for 10 days. While I was staying there, I was only allowed to sit one 10-day course and then would serve two. And when you serve two, you're basically cooking and cleaning at the centers, and then you meditate 3 hours a day. So that's pretty much the schedule. And then in between courses, you kind of have a couple days to yourself just to kind of, well, usually it's just you and one other person, so you're just kind of hanging out at an empty center, more or less. The funny thing about this, though, was that um, the serving was more intense because you had 6 to 5 volunteers in the kitchen trying to cook and serve fresh food to roughly 120 people. Needless to say, there was always one person in the group that couldn't handle this, and there would be some type of drama. Still, I really value the time I spent there, and still recommend anyone who is interested in learning how to do deep meditation to try a course for themselves. After that endeavor, I more or less stopped listening to music altogether, or if I do now, it's mellow. I got into a really long term loving relationship. I also started going to college. I also did a little Brazilian Jiu Jitsu training. But I was more about but it was more about the brotherhood for me than anything else. All in all, I was back and have been focused on my spiritual goals ever since. Of course, there still have been lots of highs and lows, though. So yeah, after I got back, I mean, it was very strange. A lot of the concentration I developed in the meditation, I was surprised how fast that went. Coming back with all the drama and everything else going on in the world. Um, but I really do think spirituality is mostly about insight, and I definitely got a lot of insight about myself, about reality, about who I was. Because you're just sitting there for hours alone with your own mind, and that's just powerful. There's so much time in both a positive and negative warrior mindset. I really wanted to share what I believe is the best way to both think about both um, being a warrior. I think I should say about both states and being a warrior. The true war is always the inner war. Everything that helps strengthen that inner war could be seen as an ally. Everything that weakens you in that inner war is an enemy. One of the epithets of the Buddha means one who has slain all his enemies. And then it goes on to explain that these enemies are the passions, also known as greed, hatred, and delusion. One thing that really resonated with me about Buddhism was that the Buddha came from a warrior clan known as the Sakya clan. To quote Wiki, the Sakya Republic functioned as an oligarchy ruled by an elite council of the warrior and ministerial class that chose its leader. The Buddha himself was trained as a type of warrior. In addition, many of the first disciples of the Buddha were warriors, so much so that it actually became an issue with the king because his elite guard wanted to leave and become monks. This was actually such an issue that to this day you still can't become a monk if you're in the service of the king. And this actually has to do with even governmental service now. So it doesn't just apply to kings, actually. Monks aren't supposed to hold any position of power. Um, and that's why, like in a lot of Buddhist countries, when they start running for political stuff, a lot of people criticize them because that's really not supposed to be what you're doing as a Buddhist monk. Or I guess if you're just a regular Buddhist, that's fine. But for the monks, they're not supposed to engage in any of that. Since the Buddha and many other monks were trained as warriors, I think this is also part of the reason why monks were able to survive in the forest by themselves. It's also talked about how those who are warriors can often make faster progress on the spiritual path due to having the necessary mental discipline, being able to face pain, physical, emotional, mental, and persevere um, through is a huge advantage when we try to face our own issues head on, which is really what the Buddhist path is all about. It's a direct path that leads to higher states of consciousness through wisely going within ourselves and addressing the root of the problem, craving or desire. Craving and desire. Yeah, both of those are kind of one and the same from a Buddhist perspective. Just to add one more point about this topic, the missing link a lot of the time for warriors who want to follow the spiritual path is that this battle is won through surrender. Sitting in meditation makes you very aware of your own inner issues, and if you aren't able to let go and flow with the process, you'll end up multiplying your own frustration. Within the context of a martial arts tournament, we may not want to surrender, but the ability to see that the internal battle is won by being with what is, without trying to change or alter it, can be quite a learning curve. And this is kind of the key thing, I think, for anyone who's really doing a lot of martial arts or trains a lot. It's just to really understand the paradox of surrender. Because if you can really let go and, especially because it's usually there's a payoff to the negativity or the mindset that we're holding. And so you can't really battle that directly. Like, I'm angry, so therefore I'm going to fight it with more anger. You have to get to a point where you just sit with the anger, allow it to be there, stop reacting to it, and slowly over time it'll dissipate. And this gets you kind of back to neutral in a way. Because, especially with Buddhist teachings, it's really not about creating some sort of ideal world that we live in, but getting back to reality and allowing to see reality for what it is versus what we mostly do is project onto reality and then get angry that it's not the way that we envision it. And there's also deeper aspects of this because you do go into like higher and higher states of consciousness as you're able to let go of more and more negativity. So, in conclusion, I really do believe that developing the qualities of a warrior and even training externally in martial arts is good. However, everything has its limits, and fighting to harm others or out of anger does not lead to inner peace. There's a balance where, through living as a warrior, you become strong and are able to defend yourself, but also live a life of peace. Since I trained and have many friends who also do martial arts, my hope is to show people how to make this shift, which is a part of why I decided to create Humble Stature to begin with. May you all be happy, peaceful, and liberated. And so that concludes my article. Um, Also, I'm going to be teaching now at a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy, Subconscious Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in North Hollywood. Um, so if anyone's interested in stopping by, it's going to be at 1:30 p.m. on Saturday. And it's open to the public, so anyone that wants to come can. Um, and also please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you for watching this. May you all be happy, peaceful, and liberated.